Temporary. That's the word my cousin Derek used at the family dinner table when Uncle Richard asked him about the future of Harrison and Associates. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, cutting into his steak without looking at me. "Claire's just keeping the seat warm until Marcus finishes his master's degree. Then we'll have a real Harrison leading the design team." I remember the sound of my fork hitting the plate. The way everyone kept eating like he'd just commented on the weather. My Aunt Linda smiled at me. That patient smile you give a child who doesn't understand grown-up conversations. My own mother, seated 3 chairs down, suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. I was 34 years old. I'd been working at my family's architecture firm for 12 years. I designed the Riverside Cultural Center that won the state AIA award last year. My name was on the door, Harrison and Associates, because my grandfather started this firm and my father built it into what it was today. But apparently, I was just keeping Marcus's seat warm. Marcus was 23, still in grad school, and had never worked a day at the firm. But he was Derek's son. And Derek was Uncle Richard's golden child. And Uncle Richard, my father's younger brother, had somehow convinced my father that this was the natural order of things. "Pass the wine, honey," Derek said to me, like he hadn't just announced my professional expiration date. I passed him the wine. I even smiled. Because that's what I'd been trained to do my whole life at Harrison family dinners, smile. Stay pleasant. Don't make waves. My mother had perfected this art, and she'd taught it to me well. But something cracked inside me that night. Something small and quiet, like the first fracture in a foundation that no one notices until the whole structure starts to shift. It started subtly, the way most bad things do. Not with dramatic confrontations or obvious betrayals, but with small adjustments that seemed reasonable at the time. 3 days after that dinner, Derek called me into his office. He was technically my supervisor, though we'd always worked more as colleagues. "Claire, I need you to start documenting your processes more thoroughly," he said, sliding a thick binder across his desk. "Project workflows, client relationship protocols, design methodology, everything. For quality control?" I asked. "For continuity," he corrected. "When leadership transitions happen, we need to ensure institutional knowledge is preserved. When, not if." I noticed that. "Marcus isn't even done with school yet," I said carefully. Derek's smile was the same patient one his mother had given me at dinner. "It's never too early to prepare for the future, Claire. Besides, this documentation will be valuable regardless. Think of it as mentoring the next generation. The next generation. Not my successor. Not my replacement. Just the natural evolution of Harrison and Associates." I spent the next 6 weeks creating that documentation. Every detail of how I managed client relationships, developed design concepts, coordinated with contractors. I told myself it was professional development. I told myself it demonstrated my value to the firm. I told myself a lot of things that made it easier to keep smiling and staying pleasant and not making waves. Then the meeting reassignments started. "Claire, I'm having Marcus sit in on the Greenwood Community Center presentation," Derek informed me 2 days before my biggest pitch of the year. "He needs exposure to high-level client interactions. He's still in school. He doesn't even know the project. Then it's a learning opportunity. You can brief him beforehand." Marcus showed up to the presentation 15 minutes late, wearing jeans to a meeting I'd specifically told him required business formal. He spent the entire hour on his phone under the table. The clients noticed. I could see it in their faces, the slight confusion when Derek introduced Marcus as part of the Harrison leadership team. We won the project anyway, because my design was exactly what they needed and I'd spent months building that relationship. But in the firm newsletter the following week, the photo showed Derek and Marcus shaking hands with the clients. I was cropped out of the frame. When I mentioned it to Derek, he said the photographer must have caught us at a bad angle. The meeting reassignments continued. The West Side development project I'd initiated and nurtured for 8 months suddenly became Derek and Marcus's oversight responsibility. "You'll still do the design work, of course," Derek assured me. "They just need the client-facing experience." Client-facing experience. I'd been managing client relationships successfully for a decade, but apparently Marcus needed my projects to learn on. Then came the office relocations. Small things, insignificant on their own. Marcus needed the conference room for study sessions. So could I take my client meetings in the smaller breakout space? Marcus needed access to the model shop during peak hours for his thesis project, so could I schedule my fabrication time early mornings or late evenings? Marcus needed the large desk by the window because the lighting was better for his rendering work, and wasn't my desk adequate? Each request came with the same patient smile, the same implication that I was being unreasonable if I objected. My mother, who handled the firm's bookkeeping 2 days a week, would catch my eye across the office and give me that look. The one that said, just go along with it, don't cause problems, this is family. The breaking point came 4 months after that dinner. At the quarterly partner meeting, I'd prepared a presentation on expanding our sustainable design services, backed by market research and potential client leads I'd been developing. It represented a significant growth opportunity and played to my expertise in green architecture. I was 3 slides in when Uncle Richard interrupted me. Claire, this is all very nice, but I think we need to table this discussion. He didn't even look up from his phone. We need to focus our resources on traditional projects that Marcus can learn from. Experimental stuff like this can wait until our leadership transition is more established. Sustainable design isn't experimental, I said, keeping my voice level. It's industry standard. And we're losing competitive bids because we don't have this capability. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Derek chimed in. But Uncle Richard's right. We need to think about what makes sense for Marcus's development timeline. My father, seated at the head of the table, said nothing. He'd been saying nothing a lot lately, ever since his heart attack 6 months ago. Uncle Richard had stepped into more decision-making, and my father seemed content to let him. I closed my laptop. So we're making strategic business decisions based on what's convenient for someone's grad school education. The temperature in the room dropped. My mother's eyes went wide. Derek's patient smile finally cracked. Claire, Uncle Richard said, and his tone had shifted from dismissive to warning. I understand you're frustrated, but this kind of attitude isn't helpful. We're trying to ensure this firm's legacy continues into the next generation. I am the next generation, I said quietly. I've been here for 12 years. I've brought in 40% of our current client base. I designed the project that won us the AIA award. And that's wonderful, Aunt Linda added, her voice dripping with false warmth. But surely you understand that eventually, you'll want to focus on other things. Family, perhaps? You're not getting any younger, dear. There it was. The thing no one had said directly but everyone had been implying. I was 34, unmarried, childless, and therefore my career was just a placeholder until I found my real purpose. Marcus was the future because he had the right chromosome and the right last name, and because in the Harrison family that's what mattered. I excused myself from the meeting. I didn't cry in the bathroom or dramatically quit on the spot. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and started making copies of my project files. That night, I pulled out all the contracts I'd signed over the years. Employment agreements, intellectual property clauses, non-compete restrictions. I'd signed most of them when I was 22, fresh out of architecture school. Trusting and eager and so grateful to be part of the family business. The contracts were airtight in protecting the firm but remarkably vague about protecting me. My designs belonged to Harrison and Associates. My client relationships belonged to Harrison and Associates. Even my innovations and methodologies, meticulously documented in those binders Derek had requested, belonged to Harrison and Associates. But I'd built something they couldn't take. I'd built relationships based on trust, not just contracts. I'd built a reputation that existed independent of the Harrison name, and I'd built skills that no documentation could fully capture. I spent the next 3 months working quietly. I came in early, stayed late, smiled at all the right moments. I watched as Marcus gradually took over my office, my projects, my position. I documented everything with the same thoroughness I'd documented my processes, except this time I was documenting the pattern of exclusion, the systematic marginalization, the slow erasure of my contributions. When Derek asked me to train Marcus on the Riverside Cultural Center follow-up project, the one the clients had specifically requested me for based on our previous work, I said yes. I was pleasant and professional and thorough. I even complimented Marcus on his fresh perspective when he suggested changes that would have violated 3 building codes. The Sunday dinners continued. My mother kept giving me those warning looks. Uncle Richard held court at the head of the table, talking about the firm's future. Derek praised Marcus's rapid learning curve. Aunt Linda asked me, every single week, if I was dating anyone special. I kept smiling, kept being pleasant, kept not making waves. Until the Sunday Uncle Richard announced they were rebranding the firm. Harrison and Sons, he said, beaming like he'd just solved world hunger. It better reflects our legacy and our future. Derek and Marcus, carrying forward the Harrison tradition. My father nodded slowly. He looked tired. He'd looked tired a lot since the heart attack. What about Claire? My mother asked quietly. It was the first time she'd questioned anything in months. Oh, Claire will always be part of the family, Aunt Linda said warmly. This is just about the firm's public image. You understand, don't you, Claire? I set down my fork very carefully. I looked at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. At Derek, with his patient smile. At Marcus, scrolling through his phone. At Uncle Richard, already moving on to the next topic. I understand perfectly, I said. The next morning, I submitted my resignation. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a professional letter thanking them for the opportunity and noting my last day would be in 2 weeks, per my contract. Derek called me into his office within the hour. Claire, let's not be hasty. If this is about the rebrand, we can discuss options. Maybe Harrison and Associates with a subtitle? It's not about the name, I said. Then what? If you need more vacation time, or a different project mix, we can work something out. I don't think you can work out what I need, Derek. His patient smile was gone. Claire, you're being emotional. Take some time to think about this. I've had 12 years to think about it, I said. I'm done thinking. Uncle Richard tried next. The same day. Veiled threats about non-compete clauses, about how hard it would be to find clients without the Harrison name. About family loyalty. I listened politely and said nothing. My father asked to speak with me that evening. We sat in his home office, the one lined with architectural drawings from 5 decades of Harrison projects. Some of them were mine. You're really leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Your mother says I should have stood up for you more. At the meetings. At the dinners. He looked old. Suddenly. Older than his 68 years. She says I let Richard push you out. Did you? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. I thought I was keeping the peace. I thought if everyone just got along, it would work out. I thought you understood that Marcus is family. I am family, Dad. You are, he agreed. But you're also, he stopped. Started again. Richard has very traditional views. And after my heart attack, when I thought about the firm continuing, about legacy and succession, he was very persuasive about what that should look like. And what I look like doesn't fit that picture. He didn't deny it. We sat in silence, surrounded by decades of work, and I realized this was as close to an apology as I would get. It wasn't enough, but it was honest. What will you do? He finally asked. I already have an offer from Mackenzie Architects, I said. It wasn't entirely true, but it would be by morning. They've been trying to recruit me for 2 years. His face went pale. Mackenzie was our biggest competitor. Claire. Or, I continued, I might start my own firm. I have the clients. I have the reputation. And I have something you and Richard never understood. I have the skills because I earned them, not because they were handed to me. I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. You built something beautiful here, Dad. You really did. But you're letting them turn it into something small and petty and afraid of anything that doesn't look exactly like what it's always been. Harrison and Sons isn't a legacy. It's a mausoleum. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Marcus was suddenly friendly, offering to help with my transition. Derek became conciliatory, suggesting we grab lunch to discuss my future plans. Aunt Linda brought homemade cookies to the office. My mother cried quietly in the break room. Uncle Richard ignored me entirely, which was somehow more honest than the rest of it. I trained my replacement, a bright young designer named Aisha who Derek had hired within days of my resignation. I felt bad for her, walking into this nest of family politics with no warning. On my last day, I took her to coffee. They're going to make you feel grateful, I told her. Grateful for the opportunity, grateful to be included, grateful that they're giving you a chance. And you'll work twice as hard as anyone else to prove you deserve it. Isn't that just work? She asked, confused. It is, until you realize you're the only one who has to prove anything. Derek's son showed up late and underprepared to every meeting and got promoted anyway. You'll show up perfect and prepared and still be told you need more development. She frowned. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should have told me. Because maybe you'll recognize the pattern faster than I did. Or maybe you won't need to, maybe it'll be different for you. I didn't believe that, but I said it anyway. Just keep copies of your work. Document everything. And don't let them convince you that being pleasant and not making waves is the same thing as being valued. My last project at Harrison & Associates was a small residential renovation, nothing prestigious. I finished the drawings, filed them away, and walked out at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. No cake. No farewell party. Just Derek's handshake and a generic best of luck and my mother's hug in the parking lot. You could still change your mind, she whispered. I really couldn't, I said. The peace I felt driving away from that building, knowing I'd never have to attend another Sunday dinner where my career was a joke and my worth was measured against a mediocre manchild's potential, was profound. It felt like breathing after years of holding my breath. I didn't go to Mackenzie Architects. I opened my own firm instead, Morrison Design Associates. Morrison was my mother's maiden name, the one she'd given up when she married into the Harrison family. It felt right, reclaiming something that had been surrendered in the name of keeping peace. The first month was terrifying. The second month was only slightly less terrifying. But by the third month, I had my first client, a commercial developer who'd worked with me at Harrison & Associates and specifically requested me. I heard you went independent, she said at our first meeting. Good. You were always the real talent there anyway. Derek's a decent manager, but your designs? That's what won us over every time. By 6 months, I had 4 active projects. By a year, I had a small team and a waiting list. Turns out, when you're actually good at what you do, people notice. They just notice faster when you're not being systematically undermined. I ran into Marcus at an industry conference about 18 months after I left. He'd gained weight probably from all those Sunday dinners. He'd also apparently graduated and officially joined Harrison & Sons as design director, a title that had taken me 8 years to earn. Claire, he said, surprised. I heard about your firm. Congrats. Thanks. Yeah, Uncle Derek was saying you landed the Parkside development project. That's huge. It was huge. It was also the project I'd initiated at Harrison & Associates, the one Derek had reassigned to himself and Marcus. The clients had followed me when I left. How are things at Harrison & Sons? I asked. Good. Busy. We just hired 2 more junior designers. That's great. And how's the Greenwood Community Center coming along? That was the project we'd won together. The one I'd designed while Marcus checked his phone. His smile faltered slightly. Still in development, some permit issues. Permit issues that wouldn't exist if they'd followed my original specifications, but I didn't say that. Well, good seeing you, I said and meant it. Running into him didn't hurt the way I'd thought it might. He was just a kid who'd been handed something he hadn't earned, doing his mediocre best with opportunities he didn't appreciate. That wasn't his fault, not really. It was the system that had elevated him that was broken. The real vindication came 2 years after I left, when the Riverside Cultural Center project, the one that had won Harrison & Associates the AIA Award, won a National Design Excellence Award. The award notification came to me, at my new firm, because the professional organization had my updated contact information. I called the awards committee to correct the error, to explain the project had been done while I was at Harrison & Associates. Oh, we know, the coordinator said. Your name was on all the original design documents. We track the individual designers, not just the firm attribution. This is your award, Miss Morrison. I accepted it at a ceremony in Chicago. My team came with me, 6 talented designers who joined Morrison Design Associates because they wanted to work somewhere that valued innovation over tradition, skill over surnames. My mother came too. She'd divorced my father 8 months earlier, a quiet dissolution that shocked exactly no one who'd been paying attention. She'd started doing bookkeeping for my firm 2 days a week, just like she'd done for Harrison's, except now I actually paid her what she was worth. Your father asked me to tell you congratulations, she said at the ceremony reception. What did you tell him? I told him to tell you himself if he cared enough. She'd stopped being pleasant and not making waves too. Turned out it ran in the family. I never heard from my father. I heard about Harrison and Sons, though, through the industry grapevine. They'd lost 3 major clients to retirement and hadn't replaced them with new ones. The Greenwood Community Center had gone over budget and behind schedule. Marcus had quit after 2 years to become a real estate developer, apparently finding architecture too demanding. They'd brought in a new design director from outside the family, which Uncle Richard reportedly hated but accepted because Derek couldn't manage both leadership and design work. The firm was still successful, still respected, still winning projects. But it had stopped growing, stopped innovating, stopped being the place my grandfather had built and my father had expanded. It had become exactly what I'd said it would become, a mausoleum. I didn't feel triumph at their struggles. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt grateful that I'd stopped keeping Marcus's seat warm and started building my own table instead. On the 3-year anniversary of leaving Harrison and Associates, my team threw me a surprise celebration at the office. They'd made a banner that said 3 years of not being temporary and gotten a cake that was definitely more than what Derek had budgeted for office celebrations. Speech. My project manager called out. I looked around at these people I'd hired, this space I'd designed, these projects on the walls that existed because I'd believed I was worth more than keeping someone else's seat warm. Thank you, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see for way too long. That I was never temporary. That none of us are temporary unless we accept being treated that way. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop being pleasant and start being honest about what we deserve. Later, alone in my office, I drafted an email to Aisha, the designer who'd replaced me at Harrison and Sons. I'd heard through mutual connections that she was frustrated, that the patterns I'd warned her about had proven true, that she was considering leaving. I offered her a position at Morrison Design Associates, not as a replacement for anyone, not as a placeholder, but as a valued member of a team that saw her clearly and completely. She started the following month. On her first day, when I showed her to her office, the one with the window and the good light and the space to grow, she stopped in the doorway. You said they'd make me feel grateful, she said. You were right. They did. And now? I asked. Now I'm grateful for different reasons. She looked at me, really looked at me. Thank you for showing me it could be different. Thank you for believing it could be different, I said. That's harder than it sounds. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights come on as the sun set. Somewhere across town, the Harrison family was probably gathering for Sunday dinner, discussing firm business and family politics and who was keeping whose seat warm this week. I wasn't there. I would never be there again. And I had never felt more at peace in my entire life.